بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone. Good morning. Jazakallah khair for taking out the time to join us. Though we are still expecting quite a few people to join in, we will get started inshallah ta'ala as we're already a bit late. So, starting with a quick review of what we went over yesterday, very briefly. We talked about the zakat year, where a person's zakat year starts when they once have nisab. And as long as they maintain some amount of wealth throughout that year, that date calculation of theirs remains valid. The only time where their date would reset is if they drop below zero. In that case, once they get to nisab again, then they would restart their date, their zakat date. Okay. We looked at the zakat due on gold and silver. These were the nisabs, 87.48 grams and 612.36. We said that you only use the nisab of gold if all you have is gold. If you have anything else, then you use the nisab of silver. Okay, so if you have wealth equal to the value of 612.36 grams of silver, you will have to pay zakat on that of 2.5%. We looked at the idea of debts and loans in zakat. So we said for debts, you can deduct from your zakatable assets any debts that you have to pay in the coming year in full, or if you're paying them in installments, the next 12 installments, meaning 12 months worth, you can deduct. And if you have any previous outstanding balances due, those can also be deducted from your zakatable assets. Expenses that haven't yet taken place, or debts which you have to pay back past 12 months, and unlawful income, all of these cannot be deducted from your zakat. Zakat will be due on them. Loans, we said there's a difference between a weak loan and a strong loan. A weak loan was where money was owed to you, not because you gave someone money and now you're owed it back, but because for some reason that money became owing to you. So in that case, we said that there won't be zakat due on that wealth. Once you receive it, then it will be joined to your wealth. You won't backdate it either. The second type was strong debts, where this is where you gave someone a certain amount of money, and now to get it back, you have to see. Either you could pay zakat on it every year, even though you don't have it back yet, or you could wait until you get it back, whenever it may be a few years down the road, and then you will backdate zakat on all the past years that where you did not pay zakat on that wealth. Okay, and this was for long-term loans. If it's short-term, meaning you will receive it back within 1 year, then you will include it in your zakat no matter what. You can't defer that. Okay, and then we did a couple of practice problems, and that is where we stopped. Today, inshallah, we will be starting with zakat in businesses, and we'll move on from there to different types of wealth. So, in a business, if someone has a business, a company, there are a number of things that zakat is due on in that business. Okay, first is the cash, which is basically your liquid assets. Okay, it could be the cash in hand in the bank. That does not matter. There will be zakat due on that. Okay. Second is cash receivables, which is basically if the business gave a loan to someone. Okay, if a business gave a loan to someone, it will follow the same guidelines as the loans that we talked about. So it depends when you're getting it back, and then you can pay it now, or you can defer it until after. If it's long term, then you can defer it until when you actually get the money back. Trades receivable. What does that mean? That means that if your business is such that you sell products, tangible products, and you have sold something to someone on credit for which they have not paid you yet, you will have to pay zakat on that amount that they owe you. Okay? This is if it's a tangible physical product. And lastly, which is maybe the most important point in business zakat, is your stock and inventory. Again, if you're selling tangible products, whatever you have in your inventory, in your stock, in your shop, zakat is due on the total value of that. Okay, the resale value. Okay, that's the most cautious route to take. The resale value of that. Okay, so these are the assets in a business that you have to pay zakat on. The cash, meaning the money that you have, money that you are owed because of a loan that you gave, money that you're owed because of something that you sold, and the zakat which is due on your stock and inventory. Okay, so, but then just like in personal zakat, there are deductibles, right? So we'll get to that after this, inshallah. A few points which are not zakatable in a business, meaning zakat is not due on these. So the first one is services receivable. Okay, the last one on the previous page was trade receivable. So in service receivable is if your business is such that it offers a service. Okay, so if you offered a service and you have not been paid for it yet, that amount of wealth that you will receive, zakat is not due on it yet. Okay, because in the previous case, the zakat that was due was in place of a physical product that you sold, but you hadn't been paid for yet. Here it's a service. Okay, so it's not the same as a product. So until you actually have the money, zakat will not be due on it. Okay, prepaid expenses, of course, that money is gone, so you're not going to pay zakat on it now. Fixtures and fittings, property, plant, equipment, anything that you need to use to conduct your business. Okay, that could be the property, it could be the signs, it could be the shelves in a shop, in a store, anything that you need to use for the sake of your business, which is not your inventory, right? All of that is not zakatable, so you won't pay zakat on that value, on the value of those. Okay, and then lastly, things like copyrights, trademarks, patents, and so on. They're not actual physical things. They're licenses instead, or rights to do certain things. So the zakat, those will not be zakatable either. Okay. Now the deductibles, like we said, we're going to talk about. So it's very similar to your own personal deductibles, right? So if you have an outstanding invoice that you have to pay, maybe your suppliers or someone, that is deductible because that is something that you owe someone else. Okay, you owe someone else. Utility bills, taxes, and so on. This is all the current, meaning that month, and previous outstanding ones. Okay, so basically whatever the business owes, the liabilities of the business, okay, whether it be in terms of paying suppliers, whether it be paying employees, you haven't paid the employees yet, and that's the amount that you owe. Okay, and then other taxes and other expenses, the current ones of that month and the ones in the past of previous months. So those also can be used as deductibles. Okay, and of course, if someone through a business gives a private loan or personal loan, it's going to follow the same guidelines as the loans that we talked about. Okay, let's look at a little more detail about this. So how will you evaluate your stock? So you're going to see that, of course, if the stock, the inventory is all intact, in good condition, you will value it at the retail price. Okay? And that is what you will pay zakat on, not the cost price. If the inventory, the stock is damaged in some way, then you will basically see what condition it is in. Okay, if it's dead, meaning it's destroyed and undelivered, it didn't reach you yet. Okay, it's in progress, in process, it's raw material, maybe you're building something, or if it's damaged, then you will look at in the condition, in the state, in the place that it is, what is the value over there? Okay, in that condition. So if it's, for example, it hasn't reached you yet, okay, in the location, the country where it is, what is it worth there? That is what you'll pay zakat on. If it's in process, right, it's something is being built, and of course the value of the materials is less than the value of the finished product. But in this case, because you only have the raw materials, you'll pay zakat on the retail value of those materials. Yeah, and if you can't, then the cost price. So in all these cases, like we mentioned yesterday, in matters of zakat, we always take the more cautious route, right? So evaluating at the retail price, that is the most cautious route to take. Yeah, so that is the way to proceed with this. Okay, assuming if it's damaged, in the case damaged, now the value has decreased, whatever value it gets in that damaged state, you will pay zakat on that value. Some examples of how different businesses, what they will have to pay zakat on. If you're a jeweler, then of course the gold, silver, and then all the jewelry at their retail price. Okay, because gold and silver, they're their own category, and then the rest is like merchandise in your store. If you have a restaurant, then all the ingredients that you have in the back, okay, all of that you need to pay zakat on that, and of course along with the cash that you have. If you're in the business of property development, then you'll pay zakat on the property on the market value. Okay, the market value of that house. And we're going to talk more about properties up ahead, inshallah. And lastly, groceries. Groceries, if you have a grocery store, for example, then of course your merchandise are your fruits and vegetables. So you will pay zakat on that. Okay. Any questions so far on anything to do with businesses?
Ji brother, assalamu alaikum. Yeah, so for business, do we have to wait for a year for the value, or it will be anything which is currently in stock?
Well, yeah, so it depends on the structure of the business. If it's such that it's in your name, so it's like it's your own wealth, right? So now you will see that if you are already paying zakat on the regular schedule, when your zakat date comes, if now you have a business, let's say in last Shawwal, after Ramadan, someone did not have a business. Okay, and throughout the year, this year, they opened a business, and now when Ramadan comes, when they're going to pay their zakat as usual, they have the business as well. So now they won't have to wait a whole year on the business wealth because it's been added on to their wealth. So they started the year with nisab, they're ending it with nisab. Whatever they have at the end of the year, they will pay zakat on that, and the business will be included in that as well.
Correct. Just say business started 4 months back, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever the worth or material do we have in the stock, right? So we have to pay a zakat, right, based on the value.
Yes.
Okay. So that 1 year policy for a zakat, keeping the stuff, is not valid on the business, right?
It is if a person remember the whole thing about the 1 year, waiting 1 year only takes place if it's your first time starting the year, right? So let's say if there was a teenager, and at the age of 15 they didn't have any other money, but they started some business online or something, right? And that's the first time they gained some wealth. So for them, that's their first time having nisab, so their year will start from when their business started. Right, so it's different for everyone. Most people will already have some wealth, so they will already be paying zakat. And when they start their business, it'll just be added on to their personal assets as well.
Okay.
Okay, properties. This is a very common. Some of the most common questions are zakat are about properties, and they're about RSPs. So let's look at properties, inshallah. In most cases, zakat is not due on properties. Okay, we already talked about if it's in your business, a property, there's no zakat due on that. Okay, if it's residential, the property is for the sake of your residence. Okay, and I say it in this way with these words. I didn't say where you live. I said it's for the sake of your residence. So that means if you buy 10 houses, all for your own residence, I might stay here sometimes, I might stay there sometimes, I might just store my stuff over here, I might just store my stuff over here, I might, keep this for my guests when they come or something. That all falls under residential property. There is no zakat due on that. Okay. Rental property. The property itself, there's no zakat due on it, because now this is in the position of a tool that you are using to conduct your sort of like a business, right? Where you're getting money from there. So there's no zakat due on the property itself, the house, but the rent that comes in, of course, that will be added if it's coming to your personal account or to your company account, wherever it's coming. Once that money ends up over there you will pay zakat on it with the rest of your wealth. Okay, but the property itself, there's no zakat due on that. This is a very common misunderstanding. Rental properties are not zakatable. Deciding to sell, meaning you have a house, maybe you live in it, maybe you don't, and you decide that now I want to sell this house. Okay, now I'm going to sell this house. Unless you actually post it to sell, okay, and your zakat date comes while the house is posted, zakat will not be due on it. Okay. The only case where zakat is due on a house, on a property, is if you buy it to sell it. Okay. And meaning you're going to buy it, you're going to work on it, and you're going to flip it right away. Okay. Because now the house is your merchandise. Just like in a regular business, you buy something and then you sell it at a higher price. Here you're buying houses, you're increasing their value, and then you're selling them at a higher price for profit. But even then, if you change your intention, okay, I'm not going to sell it yet, I'm going to keep it for a bit, then the zakat drops, and there's a zakat due on it. Okay. It's okay, we'll look at them on the next slide. You buy with the intention to sell, but have not yet posted it for sale. Yeah, you will pay zakat on it if that's your sole intention, and maybe you're just working on it, right? But it depends. Let's look at the next slide. So the intention plays a big role in this. Okay. Excuse me. You need to have a clear intention to resell. Okay. You need to have a clear intention to resell. Only then it will be zakatable. If it's for personal use, like we said, there's no zakat. No clear intention. You don't know. Okay, you got a good deal on a property, you bought it, and now you're not sure. Am I going to keep it? Am I going to sell it? Am I going to move into it? Am I going to rent it out? What am I going to do? You don't know yet. There's no zakat. You need definity in order for zakat to be due. Okay, a conditional intention. This is very common. That I bought this property. If the market goes up, I'm going to sell it. If not, I'm going to keep it. I'm going to wait. Okay, so here as well, there is no zakat because you have a condition on it. Okay. Here you have a clear intention to resell in the future, but least in the interim. So by clear intention, meaning you're actively trying to sell it. Okay. And in the meantime, it's leased. But then it's the same as the first one where you have a clear intention to resell. Okay. So there will be zakat due there as well. So the main thing to take from this is that if a person is sure, this is why they bought the house, only for the sake of selling it and making a profit, then zakat is due on that value, on the market value. Otherwise, it is not. Okay. Okay, let's do a practice problem. We did a few of these yesterday. Now they're getting more and more complicated. Okay. So let's look at it together first, and then I'll give you a few minutes to work it out. So a person's personal cash, the bank and the home, gold and silver that they have, business merchandise is 14,000. Okay. And they also own a property. Then the monthly rental income is this much. That's how much they get every month. Monthly mortgage. Again, we're going to assume this is capital only. Okay. The loan given to a masjid that a person wants to pay zakat on now, they don't want to defer it. They don't want to pay it later on. Overdue invoices. Okay, this could be in your company or personally that you owe for the things in the past. And then trades receivable, you sold something, tangible products, and you're waiting to be paid for that. And services receivable, where you offered a service and now you're waiting to receive the payment for that. Okay, so take a few minutes, try to work this out, and then we'll look at the answer. We have a question here. If property is zakatable, then the zakat will be due on fair market value. Yes. Yeah, on the fair market value. Okay. There are some scholars who say that you pay zakat on the posted price. Okay, whatever you have posted, the asking price basically. So that would be the more cautious route to take. But if you want to take it at just the market value, that is okay as well. Okay. So let's take a few minutes, inshallah, and then we'll come back and we'll look at the answer to this problem. If you have any questions while working it out, of course, you can ask. All right. Okay, let's take a look at what we have. So the first thing you always want to do is to take the gross assets. Can you see how much wealth does this person have? So here we have the personal cash, which is 42,000, gold and silver, business merchandise, the loan given to them. We say we want to pay zakat on it now. The trades receivable. Remember, only trades receivable are zakatable, not services receivable. So if you add these up, all these green entries, you get 81,600. You look at your deductibles, your monthly mortgage times 12, the capital, and overdue invoices. You get 41,400. The rental income, there isn't really a separate zakat due on that, because that it's added to your wealth every month, right? So that doesn't even count. That was there to throw you off. Okay, let's see if anyone caught that. Because if you think about it, a rental income isn't really money in your hand, right? It's the idea of how much someone pays you every month. When they pay you, it's added to your own wealth. So basically, this has already been added in here every month. So you won't count this, and you won't count the services receivable either, because it's a service. It's an exchange for a service. Okay. You subtract the deductibles from the gross assets, you get 40,200, and then 2.5% on that is $1,005. Okay. So if you really think about it, you compare taxes and zakat. Imagine someone had an income of $80,000 and their tax was only $1,000. How amazing would that be for them? Right? But that's all Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to give, and gives us so much more back in return. Okay, moving forward. Sorry, just give me a second, please. Zakat on investments. If you invest in the stock market, you have to pay zakat on your stocks. How do you do that? Let's take a look. So there are two scenarios. Either you are a day trader or short-term trader. What do you mean by short-term? Within 1 year. You buy and resell stocks within the same year, within 12 months. Okay? You will take the entire value of your portfolio and pay zakat on it, because now your stocks are like your inventory. Okay, so you'll pay zakat on the full value of your portfolio. A little side note, day trading is not permissible. Okay, but if someone is doing it, this is what will be the ruling. The second scenario is where it's long-term. It's long-term. More than 1 year. You bought some stocks and they're growth stocks, and you're gonna sit on them and wait maybe a few years down the road, maybe after you retire, at some point in the future, you will sell those stocks. But until then, you will act as though you own, well, you do own that percentage of the company. Okay, and as though you are the business owner and you are paying zakat on your business. Okay, so what does that mean? That means you're going to go and look for the balance sheet, okay, of that business. In most cases, you could find them. Yahoo Finance and some other companies are good. So you will get the balance sheet, just like you would do for your own business. How much cash is in hand? What are the liquid assets? What are the trade receivables, the services receivable? What are the liabilities? and so on. You will calculate all of that. What's the inventory? And then you will divide it by the total number of shares that the company issues. Okay. Then you will multiply that by the amount of shares that you own. Okay. Then you'll pay 2.5% on that amount. Okay, so let me repeat that. You will treat the business, the stock company, as though it's your own business you're paying zakat on. Look up the balance sheet. What are the liquid assets? What are their trades receivable? And so on, minus the liabilities that they have. And whatever amount is left, divide that by the total amount of shares that the company holds and multiplied by how many shares you own. And then pay 2.5% on zakat on that. Okay. If you receive dividends, then you just add those to your own wealth, to your own cash, and pay zakat on that. Okay, there's no separate thing for that. If you're cashing out on your stocks, then after the fees and taxes, if there are, then you'll pay zakat on that cash value. Okay. We'll be covering ETFs. ETFs is the same thing. Same thing, no different than stocks for the sake of this discussion. If it's short term, you pay zakat on the full value. If it's okay. Well, ETF will differ in the case that it most likely won't be feasible to go and look for the information of all those companies that are in the ETF. So in that case, what you could use with our next point here, that if you don't have access to the company's financials, you use a proxy of 27%. Okay. Basically, this is an amount that the National Zakat Foundation has fixed. Every year they update it based on the market. It's an average of the major companies of the world of how much of their assets are zakatable. Okay, so if someone has a hard time calculating the zakat on their stocks, they could use the proxy. Okay, so you take so in ETFs, for example, in index funds. Again, I'm saying all this thing. I'm not getting into the whole thing of permissibility of stocks, which stocks are okay, which ones are not, which ETFs are okay, which ones are not. This is just about the zakat itself. Okay, so you'll pay 27% on that. Stocks minus zakatable asset ratio, total current assets market cap times current value of my holding. Your stocks minus the total market cap. I haven't heard of that method before, but it does. I don't see stocks minus the accountable assets total current market cap times the value of your holdings. Yeah, I'd have to work it out and see exactly, but it could work as well. This method that I'm giving you here, this is what is prescribed by the National Zakat Foundation. And they're pretty much the biggest zakat organization. They operate worldwide. They're based out of the UK. They have branches in the UAE, the US, here in Canada. So this is the method that they prescribe, and many scholars I've seen use this method as well. But yeah, if whoever gave you that method, if they're assuming they are, then you could use that. That's okay. Okay. Yeah. So the easy way to go in this, if someone has a hard time doing their zakat calculations, you use the proxy. Okay, 27%. Okay, pension funds. This is where things get a little complicated, if they haven't already. Okay. By pension funds, for the most part, we mean RSPs. That's what the most common is. But if there are other pension funds, they will follow the same breakdown. Okay, RESPs, for example, they follow the same thing. So an RSP, which is a registered saving plan, or RRSP, registered retirement saving plan. Many of you may have these. If you don't, then you may in the future. So these are made up by different contributions. Okay. It could be the employer contributions. This happens very commonly. The employer on your behalf, they put some funds into an RSP for you. Okay. And this includes if they automatically withdraw an amount from your paycheck. Okay. Because if they withdraw it before they even give it to you, they didn't give it to you. Okay. It's as though, for the sake of this discussion, it's as though they're putting it directly into your RSP. You're going to see here if it's vested or not vested. Not vested means it's not in your ownership. Okay. And vested, of course, means it is in your ownership. How do you determine that? Well, look at the company policy. You can just ask them, are my RSP funds vested or not? They'll tell you. But you see that if you leave the company, if those funds stay with you and transfer over to your next company, then it's vested. Okay. If they say, no, if you leave, then the money's ours, then that's not vested. Okay. So that's what you look at there. If it's not vested, oops. Sorry. Okay. If it's not vested, then it's not your money technically, and there's no zakat due on it. If it is vested, we'll look at that in a second. You join that along with your own contributions that you're making voluntarily. Okay? That you're making voluntarily. Then you will see. Now, once this total pool of funds is in the RSP, do you have access to these funds or not? Do you have access to these funds or not? If you don't, meaning, are you allowed to withdraw money from there? Okay. Even with penalties and so on. If you can't, then you need to look further. What type of account are the funds in? If they're in a savings account, meaning the funds are just sitting there, they're not being invested somewhere further, which is rare. They're usually always being invested somewhere. Then no zakat until you withdraw it after you retire. In that case, you will backdate and pay zakat on your contributions, the employee contributions, not the employers. Okay, so it gets a bit complicated. You got to keep track of everything throughout. If the funds are invested, then they are zakatable. Okay, either annually, or you can wait until you withdraw it, and then at retirement, and then backdate it. Okay. Now, important thing here: you pay the proxy amount if you are paying it annually, meaning the 27%. One thing I want to make sure I didn't misrepresent: the 27% is not how much zakat you will pay. Okay, the 27% of the proxy is how much of that wealth is zakatable. So you will pay 2.5% of the 27%. Okay, please make sure that's clear. So in this case, if you are, and so this is the most common type of RSP. Okay, you don't have access to it, you're not allowed to withdraw it. So you could either pay the proxy amount every year because the funds are invested, so the next stocks, or you can wait until after you retire. In that case, it won't be invested anymore because you're going to have the funds on hand. You'll pay zakat on the full amount. Okay. If you do have access to the wealth, you're allowed to withdraw it. Then again, you're going to see, are they in savings or are they invested? In both cases, they are zakatable. It's going to be the full amount minus the taxes and penalties that would apply if you withdrew the money. Okay. So this is the breakdown for RSPs. Like I said, it's a bit complicated, and there are many different opinions in this. Okay, even ourselves, each year we revise this, make it a bit more accurate, more precise, because there are different ways to calculate. I mean, I can tell you right now, one opinion would be that the proxy amount is whether you pay the proxy amount, whether you are paying it now or even after you retire, after you withdraw it, because after you withdraw it, it's for what the worth was at that time in the past when you backdate something. So in that case, also it would be proxy amount. Right? So that's one case where there's a difference of opinion. This matter over here about automatically withdrawing from a paycheck, that's another difference of opinion. So there's a lot of detail in this. What I would advise practically for all of you is that if you're able to determine your zakat on pension funds easily, your case is very simple and direct, then alhamdulillah, you go with that. Otherwise, get some help. Okay, you can get in touch with us and other imams, get someone to help you, and they'll work out exactly how much you need to pay zakat. But it's important to get the details from your employer or from wherever your RSP is, that what is being done with those funds. Are they being invested? Are they being held in savings? Okay. Any questions on these pension funds, or on stocks, investments, anything like that? No, all good. Okay, let's look at some practice problems. So a person has 3 investments, meaning in the stock market, and they have an RSP where they have access and it's in savings. So let me remind you, access and savings. So it's the full amount minus the taxes and the penalties. Okay, so let's look at this together because we don't know how much the taxes and penalties are. So for the sake of this discussion, we're going to use the proxy amount. Okay, so the gross investment portfolio, which is these 3 items, A, B, and C, is $7,000. The zakatable investment is 27% of this 7,000, which is 1,890. Okay, the RSP after taxes and penalties, we're going to assume that it was $2,000. You're left with 5,000. You're going to add these two together, these 2 items. You get 6,890, and you pay 2.5% on that amount, which is 172.25. Okay.
So, brother's question, RRSP and RESP is the same calculation?
Yes, it's very similar. It is similar. It's the same thing. It depends on where the funds are being held, what's being done with them. Like I said, usually they're being invested. So you just pay zakat on the proxy amount minus the taxes and penalties. Okay. Meaning the taxes and penalties that would apply if you could withdraw it. RESP usually can't even withdraw it. So that would fall under the other category. Okay, over here. So usually RESP would be over here. So it could be annually or if it's deferred. But then it depends. Some RESPs are in the name of the children, and some are in the name of the parents. If they're in the name of the children, then as we discussed yesterday, the difference of opinion and the Hanafi fiqh, there's no zakat on the wealth of children. The other imams say that there is, and their parent or guardian has to pay zakat on that. Right? So that is to be taken into account when we're looking at RESPs.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and let's look at another practice problem. So personal assets someone has, the business assets. So let's say they already did the calculation of their debts and liabilities and so on. They're left with $32,000. Equity investments, meaning stock market, 7,500. And then they have RRSP, which is access and savings, and RESP, which is access and invested. Okay, so looking at this, we come up with On the right here, we have the total amount of each entry that will be zakatable. Okay, so personal zakatable assets will be 11,000, the full amount. Business full amount. The equity investments, we're taking 27% of this. That gives you 25. Okay, RRSP. This is the one where it's access savings after tax and penalties. So let's say the taxes and penalties were $1,000. So you'll pay zakat on 7,400. What's in the savings account? Okay, that's why we're not taking the proxy here. Our ESP, let's say it's access, you have access, but it's invested as well. You're gonna take the 27% of this, the proxy amount, because it's invested. That gives you 1458. You add these up, your zakatable assets are 53,883, and you take 2.5% of this amount, and you get 1347 and 8 cents. Okay. So again, in these three items, we took the full amount. The full amount was zakatable. Here, we took minus the penalties and taxes, which we said, let's assume is $1,000. And here, we took the proxy amount of 27%. Okay, any questions on this?
Brother, can you go to the previous screen, please?
Yeah.
On the one back, the scenario one more back.
This one?
Yeah, this one.
Do you have a question about something here?
Yes, right. So the total, the RSP is 7,000 in this one, right?
Yes.
So in 7,000, we are calculating 27% of the value.
Because it's in the savings, it's not invested. So we're just deducting the taxes and penalties.
Saving is it's in your account but not invested, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we said let's assume the taxes and penalties are $2,000. That's how we got 5,000 over here.
Okay. All right. Got it. Thank you, bro.
No problem. Okay. Okay, we're at our last section. So discharging zakat, we may be finishing earlier. A few points to take into account with discharging of zakat. The first is the intention. Okay. Yesterday we talked about when you are taking your wealth aside, putting your wealth aside from your full amount of wealth. Okay, where you your zakat date has come, but you want to pay zakat later on, like in Ramadan, for example, then you put your wealth aside. So at that point, you must have the intention of this wealth is for the sake of zakat. Okay, and then when you give your zakat ahead to the recipient, you have to have that intention. And like I said, again, if you set the wealth aside, the wealth must be given with the intention of zakat. Okay, if you have given someone a loan or some charity and say, okay, you know what I gave you, I'm gonna in my mind, I change my intention that is now zakat. You cannot do that. Okay, the wealth must be given with the intention of zakat at that time. Okay, very important. Now, who could receive zakat? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions 8 categories of people. Okay, the poor and the needy, which for the most part could be considered the same. In some cases where they differentiate between the poor and needy. The poor is the person who has enough money to get by their day-to-day expenses, but they have nothing more than that. Okay. And the needy is someone who doesn't even have enough for their daily expenses. Okay, but generally they could be treated the same. Anyone who does not have nisab, they would fall under the poor for this discussion. So if someone doesn't have to pay zakat, that means they are eligible to receive zakat. Okay, but okay, I'll mention that at the end. Those employed to administer zakat, okay, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls وَالْعَامِلِينَ عَلَيْهَا, meaning people whose job it is to go and collect zakat funds. Okay, they could be paid from the zakat funds themselves. So nowadays, this would only be um, found in either a Muslim country or over here in the West for organizations who collect zakat funds. Okay, so they could pay their employees with the zakat funds. Those employees who are responsible for actively collecting the zakat fund, not other employees. Okay, well, okay, I don't want to get into that. It's a difference of opinion. For those whose hearts need to be softened towards Islam, this does not apply anymore. Okay, this was in the beginning days of Islam, when new Muslims had just come to Islam, and Islam had not gained much strength yet. And when they accepted Islam, they were cut off from their families and pressured financially to come back to their other religions. So Islam would give them some zakat funds to help them establish themselves so that they would not leave Islam again. Okay, so but this doesn't apply anymore. Those in slavery, again, doesn't really apply. Those in debt, okay, this is a big one. Someone who is in debt, even if they have assets, they because if their debt is more than their assets, they're not paying zakat, right? So now they could receive zakat funds. In the way of Allah, this is someone who's out in an expedition, and they don't have access to their wealth back at home. They could receive zakat funds. And the destitute traveler, someone who's traveling and they lose all their stuff, they don't have access to their funds or anything, they could receive zakat funds. Okay. Now, a point I want to make, which is very important, is that you cannot make someone owner of nisab by giving them zakat funds. Okay. So what that means is, if your zakat is like $2,000, you can't give that to one person, because that will make them liable to pay zakat themselves, right? Yes, if it is someone who needs that money for their basic expenses, so even if they have that amount of wealth, they won't have to pay zakat on it, then you could give it to them. And or someone who is in debt. Okay, this is where this happens most of the time. If you want to give someone a large amount of zakat, if they're in debt and the amount that you give them is less than their total debt, then that is fine. Okay, so please keep that in mind as well. Who cannot receive zakat? Parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, spouses. Your direct family members. Well, ascendants and descendants. Parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, and then your spouses, husband and wife. None of these could give zakat to each other. Okay? The reason for that is a person should not in any way benefit from their zakat. Okay, so if you're giving it to your husband, to your wife, or to your parents, they may very well end up spending something back on you, even if it's indirectly or unintentionally. It could still happen, right? So to avoid that, you cannot give zakat to these. And then someone who is a Sayyid, family of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this is about the lineage where they come from. These families cannot receive zakat funds. And non-Muslims, zakat is only for Muslims. Masjids, Islamic institutes. Can husband pay wife's debt like a student loan if wife is not earning money and husband cannot afford to pay from his own money? Yes, he could pay off the debt on her behalf. Yeah, I don't unless I'm missing something. Are you asking something about zakat in that context, or that's just a general question? By zakat, can a husband pay a wife's debt like student loan? Oh, can the husband use his zakat to pay off her loan? No, you can't do that. You can't do that. Because of this big point right here in red. Okay, transfer of ownership to an individual, what we call tamlik. Tamlik is a rukn of zakat. What does that mean? Like in our salat, qiyam is a rukn. You have to stand in your salat. Sujood is a rukn. If you miss one of those, your salat is not valid. Tamlik, transfer of ownership, is a rukn. It's the rukn of zakat. Okay, it must be transferred into the ownership of a person, not a company, not a masjid, not an Islamic institute, not for a public project like a well or a water pump. Okay, and charities who do collect zakat must give all of it to their recipients. The only exception in that is if they use it for their workers who are actively collecting the zakat funds, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given permission for that. Okay, now what happens actually, you might be thinking, oh man, masjids take zakat all the time. Well, what are they doing? Right, and Islamic institutes as well. So the masjids who collect zakat, they take it to give ahead to people who come to them because they are in need. Okay. Masjids cannot take zakat funds for their own expenses or their own projects. If they do, they're doing something very wrong and a very great disservice to their community, because the person's zakat will not be discharged. Okay. Islamic institutes, what happens, like we do that at Al-Ihsan, we take zakat funds, but we don't take it to us because it has to go to an individual, right? So actually, I think this is the next slide, or it's going to come. Yeah. Okay. So I'll come back to this. Al-Ihsan accepts zakat funds. Okay. What happens is those students who want to enroll in our programs, right, but they can't because of some financial difficulties. So our practice has always been, we never deprive anyone from Islamic education, whether they could afford it or not. Okay, we offer different options. So if someone cannot afford the tuition, but they are eligible to receive zakat funds. So what we do, we sign a contract with them. They authorize us to receive zakat on their behalf. Okay, so people give us zakat, it's as though they're giving it to those students directly, and then we use that to make up for the fee deficit of those students. Okay, so if you're looking for a place for a good sadaqah jariyah, your zakat, if you give your zakat to Al-Ihsan or other Islamic institutes, knowledge institutes, then anything that the students learn ahead will be in your account. Yeah, I'm going to talk about National Zakat Foundation and Islamic Relief as well. I just want to cover this point over here. Where to discharge your zakat? Okay, so there are different options, locally or internationally, to relatives, to communities, countries in needs. So the main point you want to look here is relatives first. Okay, if you have relatives who are in need, then you need to give them your zakat first, whether they are local, whether they're international, anywhere they are. I'll even tell you, don't give it to Al-Ihsan, give it to your relatives, okay, who are in need. Your right is to them first. Your obligation is to them first. Okay, if you don't have that situation, or you have leftover funds afterwards, then you can see. Okay, it's your job to assess and see where you think your funds will help people the most. Okay, whether it be in countries overseas where people are in need, or it be locally, you need to assess and see what is best. Okay, now over here I want to talk about National Zakat Foundation and Islamic Relief. So National Zakat Foundation, they, like we said, they operate worldwide, and they operate in Canada as well. And their focus is on distributing zakat wealth locally. Okay, because it is somewhat a matter of a difference of opinion whether zakat should be what is preferred. Both are okay, of course. What is preferred more, to give zakat locally, to distribute locally, or internationally? Um, so they focus on distributing zakat locally. Okay, and the reason why I'm pointing this out is because it's difficult to find organizations that could be trusted, okay, to distribute your zakat in the most correct manner, and who have ulama working with them, scholars who know how to distribute zakat properly. Zakat isn't an easy topic. Okay, it's not like other topics that anyone could just get up and talk about, or who knows about. As you saw in different types of wealth, there are a lot of details and intricacies. Okay, now, so National Zakat Foundation, they operate locally. Islamic Relief, they operate internationally. Okay, they look and see which countries have Muslims that are in need, are going through difficult circumstances, and they help them out through those zakat funds. Okay, so they as well. Again, it's very difficult to find organizations that you can trust to administer your zakat overseas internationally. They are one of those that you can trust. Okay, again, they have ulama, scholars working with them who know what they are doing, and they make sure the wealth receives the wealth is conveyed to where it needs to be sent. Okay, so again, I'm going to say, to summarize again, you need to assess yourself where you think your zakat will be most beneficial, and you give it there, inshallah. All right. Right. One thing I wanted to mention is that um, if you're giving your zakat to a charity, Al-Ihsan is a charity, National Zakat Foundation, Islamic Relief, they're all charities, they will give you a tax deductible receipt for your zakat. Okay. So you could use that. Remember, we talked about benefiting from your zakat. So you could use it, but what ulama advise is that whatever wealth you get back because of that tax receipt, you should give that again as a donation somewhere. Okay, so you are benefiting others through that tax receipt, not yourself from your own zakat. Okay, that's the advised method to process to take. Our last topic, and we'll end inshallah. If you have missed zakat in the past, if you have missed zakat, then you need to look back and see, okay, which years did you miss? Try to calculate how much wealth you had at that time, and pay zakat on those outstanding balances. Again, at that time, you will deduct liabilities that you had back then as well. And just like you do for your current zakat, you will do it for the past zakat. Okay, if you paid zakat in the past, but not on certain things. Okay, let's say you were paying zakat on your gold, silver, and your cash, and you didn't know that you have to pay zakat on your RSP, for example. Right now you know. So now you're going to go back and do the same thing, but for that specific amount of wealth. See how much you had each year, how much was zakatable, and pay zakat on that amount. Okay, and when doing things like this, past calculations, if you are unsure of amounts, always take the higher amount. Okay, like we said, as a precaution, to make sure you're not paying less zakat. So you pay more, that's fine, it'll count as sadaqah. But if you pay less, then that will be a problem for you. Okay. Now, to summarize our entire discussion over the past 2 days, you need to see what are your total zakatable assets. Okay, whether it's your personal wealth, whether it's a business, whether there are investments in the stock market, whether there are pension funds, anything you have, you see what is the total amount of those zakatable. Minus liabilities. Do you owe debts? How much do you owe? Who do you owe to? When do you owe it? Take that into account. Subtract that from your zakatable assets. Whatever is left, you pay 2.5% on that amount. Okay, that's the overall gist of the entire discussion on zakat. There are categories that we did not discuss, things like zakat on livestock, zakat on agriculture, okay, crops, vegetation. That's a whole other discussion. We didn't get into it because it's not really practically applicable to most people today. But if there is someone who has questions about things like those, you get in touch with us, inshallah, and we will help you out, inshallah. We'll end with Q&A if there are any questions anyone has. So throughout, we had asked that you only ask questions about specific topics that we were talking about. Now, if you have anything in general about zakat to ask, you may do so. Yes, the recordings, we will send out an email, inshallah. They'll be posted on Al-Ihsan's Facebook and YouTube pages, and we'll send you the links to those, inshallah. And we'll send you a copy of the slides as well for your reference.
Are you going to send to everyone in this group the copy
Yeah,
for the slides?
Yeah, everyone who registered,
Okay, good.
whether they're able to attend or not, we'll send it to you, inshallah.
Jazakallah.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so if there's no questions, it seems like at this point, we will end it at that. If anyone does have questions in the future, I'm just gonna send some contact info in the chat. You can take that down. Okay. This is our general email for Al-Ihsan. If you want to contact me directly, you could email me, taha@ihsan.ca. And if you have specific questions about zakat, we can set a time. We'll give you a call and we can work it out, inshallah ta'ala. Again, feel free to share this contact with anyone else who may have questions about zakat. All right. We do have other programs coming up, so please check our website regularly. We are planning a longer course on zakat and on basically on financial obligations in Islam. So that will cover things like zakat, wills and inheritance, and all those topics will be discovered. That will be next year, inshallah, before Ramadan. We will offer that course. It'll be a longer course, maybe like over the length of 1 month or so, and we'll go into even more details of all these matters, inshallah. All right, so please keep in touch. Follow us on Facebook, Al-Ihsan Institute. All our updates of courses and programs are always posted there as well. All right. Jazakallah khair. I would also want to express our appreciation to National Zakat Foundation, Islamic Relief Canada, and Ask a Muslim for helping sponsor this program. They made it possible for all our attendees to attend without having to pay any fee for the program. So may Allah reward them for their efforts. And do consider them if you want to distribute your zakat locally somewhere or internationally. All right. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for attending. Jazakallah for taking time out of your weekend for this. And inshallah, we hope to see you again, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam. Jazakallah, brother. May Allah reward you for this.
Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.